Again, my name is Beth Ann Casperson, been with Equal Exchange for 22 years. I started in sales. I've been the quality manager for 18 years. If you don't know what Equal Exchange mission is, it's to build long-term trade partnerships that are economically just and environmentally sound, to foster mutually beneficial relationships between farmers and consumers, and to demonstrate through our success the contribution of worker co-ops and fair trade to make a more equitable, democratic, and sustainable world. Africa. This is the Democratic Republic of Congo. But this sliver over to the left is really the only water sea access the Congo has. It's mostly a landlocked country. And so we have this really great arrow at the center of the screen pointing to a place, if you can see, maybe just getting close and squint, it says Lake Kivu. This is Eastern Congo, and this is where the vast majority of the work in specialty grade Arabica coffee is taking place. It's also the home of the Pansy Hospital. So right below the tip of the arrow, you'll see a name, it's Bukavu. That is where the Pansy Hospital is. And so why am I showing you all this? One, I want you to sort of have a sense of what we're talking about, because we are talking about the center of Africa. And also just helping to understand what is surrounding DRC. And then there's another event that I'm sure you're all familiar with, which is the Rwandan genocide in 1994, which millions of people's lives are lost. It's guesstimated up to 6 million people. A horrific event, and that has left ramifications across Congo in a lot of different ways, with the different militia groups settling in different parts of Eastern Congo and in Congo in general and other places like Uganda. So there's this violence that continues, and it's important to understand why the violence continues. So Congo is rich in these natural resources. So things like timber, so wood, right? Land, there's a lot of land, but the most notable resources that have caused and wreaked havoc on the country are in minerals. So minerals like tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold. And these are very valuable resources. And you can find them in the laptop that I'm speaking on today, and you can find them in your cell phone. And so these minerals are valuable to the outside world. And so what has happened over time is you've had warring groups that seek control of the mines, and they use sexual violence as a tactic of war in order to gain control. There are more than 130 different militias or groups, armed groups, and there might be more. That's the number I have for today. I mean, it's terrible. And so the sexual violence is used, as I said, a tactic of war, where they go and destroy communities, they rip apart families through sexual violence. And this is not just sexual violence against women, it's children, it's men, and it's been guesstimated in the past that I would say probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I haven't seen a recent number at this level, that one person is sexually assaulted every minute, which is, I've been talking for how many minutes? Like that's a horrific number, and totally unacceptable. And so what I want to talk to you today about is the formation of the Congo Coffee Project. When I learned about sexual violence in the DRC, I was, first of all, astounded. We buy coffee from Ethiopia, which is not on this map, and Uganda. And so those places I knew a lot about. I travel quite a bit. I do a lot of capacity building and training, but the DRC I did not know. So let's move to the next slide. So in 2011, a representative from Pansy Foundation approached us and said, I want to talk to you about this idea that we make a special coffee to raise awareness about sexual violence from Equal Exchange. Equal Exchange roasts it and sells it, and we raise money for a hospital called the Pansy Hospital and Foundation. I'll talk with you about who they are in a moment, but I wanted to tell you about how this story comes to life. So at the time, we weren't buying any coffee. Again, I was just learning about this issue. And I reached out to a coffee colleague and friend of mine who pointed me in the direction of a small farmer co-op, an up and coming farmer co-op called Sopakti. And so we were able to connect with the farmer co-op. Equal exchange doesn't really do this. Like, this is a very unique situation. We're very, as that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share our mission as well, is like, this is a very special project, but for very important reasons, right? This was a moment where we said, we have to do something and we have to do something different. So by creating the product, the goals were to support coffee farmers, right? To buy coffee. And so we sought out these farmers and began working with them and creating a relationship that now spans more than a decade. Advocacy, so raising awareness about sexual violence through the sales of the coffee by talking to people, and then those people talking to other people. So for you on this call, thank you for being here. Sexual violence is not an easy topic to bring up in general conversation, but it is an important topic that's not just happening in the DRC, it's happening in other parts of the world as well, and right here in the United States, where we have domestic violence and other issues. The funding, again, is used to support survivors of sexual violence through donations to the Pansy Foundation. And the goal for me was, how can we have a real and true impact? And it felt like we had to do something big. So we do $1 per bag. I've seen lots of projects out in the market that say, oh, we donate 10 cents or 25 cents. And it felt like we needed to do something more substantial. And so we do $1 per bag. The equal exchange pays into that fund. Next slide, please. So here's the Pansy Hospital and Clinics. The gentleman down at the bottom in the center, his name is Dr. Dennis Mukwege. He is the founder of the Pansy Hospital. The Pansy Hospital didn't actually start out as a place to treat survivors of sexual violence, but it has become very well known in the world for that work. He has been an outspoken activist out in the world, talking about sexual violence in the DRC, talking about things that are very, can be touchy subjects politically. But he was recognized and given he was a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for this work. He's one of my heroes and someone out there in the world that constantly is pushing to talk about this in whatever space he can use his voice. So the Pansy Hospital grounds, you can see to the left, and some of the staff, it operates as a regular hospital, but again, has become really well known for treating survivors of sexual violence. The picture in the top right corner, you can't really see my tiny head there, but I'm there with a blouse on that's blue and white, and I'm meeting with Mama Zawadi, who is Dr. Mukwege's sister, and she runs the aftercare center. And she was introducing me to some of these children, and the child that she has her hand on was raped at 4 years old. And so this type of violence does not see age, does not see gender. This is just meant as a tactic of war, again, because of control, power, and money, really. So Pansy has become this world-class place for people to be treated for sexual violence. So they have 4 different pillars. The first is medical treatment, so saving lives, a very obvious and important piece of their work. Mending souls, so psychosocial treatment, treating people for their trauma. Gaining independence and reintegration services. The truth of the matter is that when someone is sexually violated and they try to return home to their husband or their family or their communities, Sometimes they're ostracized. And so that can actually play a giant role in your healing process, of course, because you're not being accepted back. And so they work on reintegration services, but one of the things they do is they have vocational training. So teaching survivors of sexual violence different skills, and they have skill building activities like sewing or making bags, basket weaving, excuse me. And those are important things so that when the survivors leave, they have either gained a new skill or have some type of information to be able to go out and start a new life or try to continue on. The fourth pillar is justice. So, but these are the four pillars of what they do at Pansy Hospital. So the hospital itself is in Bukavu, which is about a 5-hour drive, if not more, away from where the coffee farmers are. So this is where we started where the funding started out. Please go to our webpage if you want to read where all of the project money has gone, because I'm very proud of that, and there's a lot to see there. But I won't dig into the details too much more on that because I want to talk about the farmers. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is really a story of hope. And this picture really demonstrates that beautifully. The Lake Kivu, where the coffee farmers are located, is one of the most beautiful places I've been in my entire life. It's at this very high altitude. It's a very deep lake, but it's stunning. And the waters are crystal clear. There's hardly any motorboats. It's absolutely amazing how pristine it is. But to me, this picture symbolizes a few things. One is how beautiful it is there, despite all of these complex challenges, but the hope that I see in coffee. So let's go to the next slide. So this, I want to introduce you to the folks and the coffee farmers at Sopakdi. They were founded in 2008. And there are more than 11,000 farmers that belong to this cooperative. The gentleman at the center of this photo, he's to the left of the guy with the hat. He has a striped shirt on. It's sort of white and maroon striped. His name is Joachim Munganga, and he is the founder of Sopakdi. He really wanted to create a co-op that where people would have access to market and try to figure out how to do that. And he did that with his uncle, donated some land, tried to figure out how to organize farmers. And then he connected with a group in the UK called Twin Trading, and they were able to export coffee. And so they were really the first co-op to be formed. Today, there are more than 30 co-ops in Congo, probably more than that. But it's really amazing how that has changed. Coffee used to be very popular in the 90s, but because of wars, the genocide, along with other agricultural challenges, coffee sort of fell by the wayside, also because of infrastructure and transportation. And so farmers in Congo used to take their coffee and transport it across the lake and sell it as Rwandan coffee. And I'm sure out in the world, you've seen Rwandan coffee. I feel like it has more of a name than Congolese coffee does, for a lot of reasons. And so they would do that, but many men lost their lives in that process. It is a very deep lake. It is a dangerous crossing, and not as many people know how to swim as I would expect. And that has been really terrible for the men that have lost their lives in that process. So I'll talk about the women's group here in a second, but there are many widows have been many widows in that process. They're organized in 21 sectors. When I first met them, they were probably about 3,000 farmers. Their success, their organization, their ability to get to market through people like Equal Exchange, who were the first buyer of their coffee from the United States and helped to promote their co-op. And so they are certified organic, and they are fair trade certified as well. And they're doing really well. Next slide, please. So I'd like to add in a little bit of information about the agricultural side, because there's obviously the people side, the human side, who are the farmers, and so what do they do? And coffee quality is so important to us at Equal Exchange that it has to be, they go hand in hand. You have to have good quality coffee to encourage people to keep coming back. And so I'm sharing a couple of what I call nerdy details. So for those of you who might think of varietals, a way to think about it is sort of like wine, right? There's different types of varietals. It's the same in coffee, and we are talking only about Arabica. There are two varietals are growing, Bourbon and Jamaica Blue Mountain. They grow their coffee at a very high altitude, which creates this beautiful sweet coffee flavor profile. And I'm talking about natural flavor. There's nothing added here. And their processing is central washing. So they've built up the infrastructure over time to meet the needs of buyers and understand that. And that's something that I've helped them to understand as well, is what does a buyer want? What's the US market like? What does a quality person do? So that's something that I've done, and I think that it's helped them in certain aspects of their work. The next slide. This is the women's group. Every year when I go, I try to go annually. COVID has really put a made it so that I can't go there right now, but I meet with the women's group to learn about what they're working on. They've had a variety of projects over the years. There are 21 different women's groups. They've done everything from using funding to buy motors and then to rent boats on the lake, which I think is pretty creative. They bought a flour mill, but then discovered that they weren't very good at making flour, which I also think is pretty amazing. They recognized their mistake and they sold the equipment because they weren't doing well with it. And then they landed on a different project, goats. So they didn't have enough money to buy goats for everyone, but they bought 300 goats and decided to breed them. And so every woman would have a goat. 15%, more than 15% of the farmers at Sopakdi are women. Many of them are widows, having lost their husbands either in warfare or in transport across the lake, or for a variety of reasons. And so the other thing they've done that's really amazing too is they created a savings and loan program called Avec, which is the French word with. And the idea is that each sector has their own savings and loan program. That has spread to even smaller, like further out communities. So now there are more than 200 of these savings and loan programs. And the idea is that each person brings a little bit of their money to the pot, and then they have the pot of money together. And then they're accountable to the group about borrowing it and paying it back with a modest interest rate of, I think it was 1% or 2%. It was very, very low. It's really trying to figure out how to do microloans on their own. And so this has been successful, so successful that it's not just a women's group activity anymore. It's spread, and so they've invited men into it as well. But either way, I think that that's very important, not to just have their own processes, but it's really about families, right? So, and equality, and I think that they've done a really stunning job around that work. This is the Bulanga Clinic. So I mentioned Pansy Hospital, Dr. Dennis Mukwege, and that hospital, which is far away from where Sopakdi is and the farmers. And so in 2016, Pansy Hospital created a clinic in Bulanga, which is right near where the coffee farmers live. The coffee farmers are very happy because they knew that the funding would go, or we decided to dedicate the funding towards this clinic. So the basic infrastructure was created through the World Bank. And then over time, they've solicited funding, not just from us, but from other places as well, to try and build up that clinic. And so we funded in 2016, we funded a part of a water project to bring clean water up from the lake to the clinic. That was a long, slow process. The second piece of what we've done is to build a laboratory, and you can see that here. The top picture is when I was there in September of 2019. The bottom picture is the finished laboratory. And so they didn't have a place to do their basic lab operations, whether it's related to survivors of sexual violence or just patients in the community. It's also important to note that anyone that is a survivor of sexual violence is welcome to go to the Bulanga Clinic or to the Pansy Hospital free of charge. There's no charge, there's no money charged for that. And that's important. And I have to say it every single time I go. I actually got on the radio to talk about this, like to the local community with a translator. Mostly because I think people are, one, you're afraid to go and get help, and two, you don't have any money. And so how do you do that? And so this is a free service. The other services they offer are basic services, everything from you don't feel well, you have the flu, to malaria, which is a big problem, or even childbirth, right? So they have those services right there, of which they ask people to donate, but you can imagine that that can be very challenging for folks to pay for those medical bills. Sometimes it's difficult for people here in the United States to pay for our medical bills, so it makes sense. So the impact of our work. I am so pleased that we've raised more than $110,000 for the Pansy programs. It feels really positive over the last 10 years. We've supported farmers. We've bought more than 800,000 pounds of coffee. We buy somewhere around, I'm going to say 15 or 20% of the production from Sopakti. Some years that's a little bit higher. It's never lower, that's for sure. And we're a really valued client of theirs and partner. I've helped to train coffee quality personnel. I still do this. I use WhatsApp a lot with people who live internationally. And so I get little text and pictures from Karen right now, who's like showing me an exercise she's working on or consulting me. So I feel like I have that really nice connection with them. And contribution. We're trying to continue to raise awareness of sexual violence through the Congo Coffee Project. And that's really important work that I can only do so much. And so thank you for being here. If you leave and you tell one person about this, then that's success. If you told 2 or 3, that might even be better. But I think it's just little by little, we have to educate people out there. And then through a separate process, Equal Exchange every year as an organization, as a company, has charitable contributions that we give to different groups. And so in 2019, we gave $19,000 to the Pansy Hospital to create a savings and loan program for the survivors of sexual violence. So I think that's really interesting because the co-op has their savings and loan program that's very small. And then Pansy is doing that as well. And I spoke with Dr. Mukwege about this, and he was really enthusiastic about the idea. It was, this came from Pansy. And I'm pleased that we were able to contribute to that. Next slide, please. Challenges and action steps. So the needs are high, the resources low. I feel really proud of where we've gotten to, but there's more work to be done. Cholera is a big challenge. On the shores of Lake Kivu, fresh and clean drinking water is really difficult to come by, and cholera, at the time I was there, Ebola was a big problem and scare. And they're saying we're not even as worried about Ebola as we are about cholera, right? Cholera is every day, and that will not stop. So drinking water is a challenge. COVID-19 has been very difficult from a transportation perspective. And for farmers, food is not moving, which you can imagine if transportation is a challenge, food is not moving along with our coffee. So we bought coffee from them during this last harvest, and many of those contracts are late. So That's challenging for a variety of reasons. It's supply, right? So that feeds into this. We have plenty of coffee, so don't worry to feed the Congo Coffee Project, but it's definitely a challenge for them and frustrating, really frustrating for them. There's still more than 130 active militia groups. These are the same groups that are controlling those mines, and sexual violence really continues. I spoke with the folks at Pansy before this webinar to find out, like, so has it gone down? Because I always, I'm the eternal optimist, wanting that hope of like maybe this impact or maybe something will change. And it hasn't. The hospital is still seeing 7 to 8 people a day, right, for survivors of sexual violence, which is outrageous. And so this is a long, slow process of education outside of Congo, in Congo, and everywhere. And yeah, it's one of those challenges. Next slide, please. So how does it taste? This is Dr. Boima. So I wanted to end on a positive note because this is very positive work. Dr. Boima, I mentioned, is the director at the Bulanga Clinic, where our funding is going. And he was so excited that I brought him a coffee bag. It's the old design. As I think someone mentioned earlier, we changed our design, so I hope y'all like it. And he was very excited to hold it. This coffee is very high quality. When we first started buying there, it wasn't. I will be very frank, like this was very mission-driven work and the coffee was pretty good. But today it is among our finest coffees, and I'm not just saying that because it's Congo and this project, but as the lead coffee taster, I can say that it's among our highest rating coffees. It's really sweet, it's really delicious.